New details tonight as a D.C. man was released from prison today after more than 30 years. His family has been fighting for years to free the nonviolent drug dealer who had a life sentence. DC News Now's Daniel Hamburg joins us in studio. And Daniel, advocates now want others in his boat to have the same opportunity.
Well, Mark, his family is ecstatic to have him home. Advocates close to the family say for a nonviolent drug offense, he shouldn't have had a life sentence, and neither should others.
You have people who have committed murders who come home before somebody with a nonviolent crime. That's an injustice.
According to the website freetonylewis.com, Tony Lewis Sr. was a part of a 29-person conspiracy in 1989, and he was the last defendant serving his original sentence of life without the possibility of parole, convicted at 26 years old of conspiracy to distribute cocaine.
We have to address the violence in our community, but the answer is not mass incarceration, especially for nonviolent offenders.
Ronald Moten with Unmute DC says it was a community effort to get him released, spearheaded by Lewis's son, Tony Lewis Jr.
I've been working with him for years in the community for the returning citizen population. He's advocated for people like his father and young people who never had a chance to go to prison to try to keep him out of prison.
Under the First Step Act of 2018, a judge reduced his sentence to time served on Friday. Deanna Maria Lewis is president of the Washington Bar Association.
And so there was an argument about, Tony Lewis Sr.'s compassionate release, about his age, about the fact that he had, a solid record as an inmate without incident.
Tony Sr. is now 60 years old and a grandfather. Tony Jr. telling DC News Now today, it's been an emotional day, but he's thrilled to have his dad home.
There was and still is disproportionality as it relates to incarcerated Black and brown individuals, particularly men, in the justice system.
To that end, Moten says there's more work to be done.
This cannot be the end, but this is just a sign of what can happen when everybody comes together for justice.
Now, Tony Lewis Jr. is a popular DC activist and an author. He wrote a book in 2015 entitled Slug, A Boy's Life in the Age of Mass Incarceration. In a tweet today, he said, God is the greatest. In the studio, Daniel Hamburg.
The man who helped him put together and run that operation that the government says brought in about $1 million every single week. His name is Tony Lewis Sr. He's asked for similar consideration from the feds, but thus far, his appeals have been denied. His son, Tony Lewis Jr., is a well-known advocate for returning citizens here at the nation's capital. He's with me tonight. Tony, thanks again for joining me. This is really important to us. It got out, reports that Rayful Edmonds trying to get out, which obviously caused a lot of people, to talk, is generating a lot of buzz on social media. Where does that leave your dad, Tony Lewis Sr.? Where is he?
His situation, though they went to prison together, the latest developments in the case of Mr. Edmonds really is something that's all onto himself. That was a result of his activity after their incarceration. Since they went to prison in 1989, my dad has been very accountable for his actions and really worked to help other inmates, particularly younger inmates, and work with me to do a lot of redemptive and restorative acts in the community, helping families with incarcerated loved ones, mentoring, incentivizing young inmates getting GEDs, and even working with the city to caution young people in the community from traveling down the road that he did. So that's what we've been focused on.
All right, let me lay out the two distinct paths here. You don't need to comment on Rayful Edmonds, okay? You can talk about your dad, but it's known fact, and the government doesn't back away from this. This is why one of the reasons they want to let Rayful Edmonds out now. They say he has cooperated, he has allowed them to arrest other drug dealers, and they think he has helped the government, okay? So he's earned his way toward getting out of prison. Your dad has done it a different way. He didn't cooperate, or he had nothing to say to the government. Was that the case?
Right. And he, been in prison 30 years.
Okay.
Right.
They both, okay, so, but you say he's been engaged in prison reform programs.
Prison reform programs. I'm off his tree, right? And I've been one of the most preeminent preeminent activists, community pillars. So directly in terms of the work that he's doing inside the penitentiary with younger inmates and indirectly through my work. So I think we're looking at this from that perspective.
What do you say to the families who say, what about the victims? What about the chaos? What about the death, the destruction that these two guys caused?
I say that, well, I wouldn't say that those two guys caused it alone, but I would say I hear that. I say that 30 years in prison is the penance for that. I say that we also got to look at the context of their decisions. My father went to prison at 26, right? Grew up in a community that he didn't necessarily see. He was victims of trauma, and growing up in a community where he didn't see a way out. He chose a lifestyle that led him there. But he has been held accountable. So I think for people, it's not being not sympathetic to victims. But I would say that my father is not convicted of a violent crime, and he has served 30 years in prison.
Okay, got it. Your father can see this right now from where he is?
Yeah.
He can watch this?
He can.
He's in Cumberland? Okay, fine. I'd like to go interview him in prison. Okay, yeah. So I'm making that offer.
I actually had the opportunity to do that, you know.
I know. As a matter of fact, I want to show some of that right
Sure.
now. Let's hear from Tony Lewis, Sr. He's talking about what he's lost in the 30 years he's been behind bars.
I've lost a lot. Being home with you, now you've given me this beautiful granddaughter. I'm losing that time with her. That really hurts. When she comes to visit, it's just never enough time. Mom, brother, sister, nephew, now grandma, gone.
Now, the feeling on the part of a number of people on social media is that if Rayful Edmonds is allowed out because he is a snitch, he couldn't come back here. He's in witness protection right now. Is your dad in witness protection or the general population?
He's definitely in general population.
Okay, and if he is able to get out on appeal or whatever, he would come back to Washington, he'd come home?
He would come back to a household, my household, with my wife and his two granddaughters. My father is past criminal menopause, right? I would be able to connect him with all kinds of supports and reentry services. He would not be a threat to the community, and actually he would be an asset to the community to help increase public safety. And like at that, what you just shown was really a part of a PSA to young people. And his voice and his connectivity, I think, could really encourage young guys and older guys alike to make better choices.
Okay, let's hear him say that. You've got another clip from the interview you did with your dad. Let's hear from Tony Lewis Sr. again.
Assaults do happen in prison. Your property is taken in prison. You can be harmed, stabbed, beaten, and everything else in prison. People shooting guns out there on the street, think they gangsters and all that. You come here, you ain't got no gun. This is real life right here.
Riveting, okay, powerful message. And we've seen in the past with Black Men's Alliance, Peaceaholics and other groups that ex-offenders, have a role here, and they can turn some of these young, guys in the street around. You see that as a role for your father coming out?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, in my work in helping returning citizens or working with returning citizens, I know the impact that my father has even had when guys come home directly from jails that they've been incarcerated with him, and talked about the influence that he had on them inside. And even he's created linkages and connected people with me in order for me to help them get on their path to positivity. So this is something that he's already doing actually inside. So I could imagine he and I together could be an incredible force in our city.
What are his chances of getting out? I mean, Rayful Edmonds has the government, the Trump administration behind him. They're going to go to a judge, Emmett Sullivan, federal judge, who's going to get this case, and they're going to plead on behalf of Rayful Edmonds to let him out. Your dad doesn't have that kind of backing, okay? And I think you've made a case here, but what are his chances right now? Where is his appeal?
If he can file for certain motions around sentencing reform, like the drug -2, but other than that, a presidential pardon is probably the next step.
A presidential pardon. And if not, how much more time is he looking at?
He has life without parole.
He's got life.
And this is my father's first time in prison, first time going to prison. in prison 30 years, and I don't feel, and people can call me naive or biased, but I don't feel like he deserves to die there. I think 30 years or anything moving forward is enough for what he's been convicted of.
Yeah, you're a great representative for your father. I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
sir.
everything you've said here, and hopefully young guys out there in the streets also hear your message and your father's message from inside the prison. Okay.